Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Thank you guys for joining us today, especially final part of the Ditch the Textbook webinar series today. As those who have been here and been around for the past four prior to this will know, this is a way for you guys to learn actionable insights and solutions into those daily challenges that you guys are facing, specifically around like day-to-day business struggles that textbooks can't provide, knowing that textbooks are still important. Like you do learn a lot from a textbook, but how can we take that training and take that initiative to help build our business even more outside of the textbook? And with that being said, we've had a ton of fun having you guys here with us. Maybe for those of you who it is your first time, I will give a quick intro. My name is Elizabeth Hansen. I am the marketing campaign manager here at Interplay Learning, and I am your moderator and host. And so I'll be monitoring the chat. Feel free to throw questions in the chat box. Feel free to answer any questions that we put out in the chat box. And while we're waiting for a few more participants to join in here, please take a second to answer the poll. We will be, like I said, throwing a couple sound offs in the chat throughout, as well as this poll to give you a chance to fully participate, because those of you that do fully participate in 3 of the 5, so if this is your third, you will receive a $75 gift card of your choice following this. And thank you to those of you who have done that so far. We've appreciated having you guys with us. So today we are chatting about how you can scale your business through training and repeatable processes, and then also a little bit of a discussion on gamification and how you can really make learning fun for your technicians and for those employees that you have. Before we get into the fun, though, a little bit less fun, the housekeeping, if you will. So all attendees will be muted for the duration of this webinar. And if you do have questions, put them in the chat box. You can send them directly to me and I can answer them, or we can pop up a few throughout the webinar and/or Q&A at the end based on time allowing. Also, you will receive a webinar replay link within 24 hours of webinar end. So you'll be able to watch this again and be able to contact through that way as well. With all of that being said, joining us on today's webinar is Joel Berken. Joel Berken creates and connects meaningful learning experiences with learners across home service brands. He is the online learning manager of Benjamin Franklin Plumbing, 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning, and Mr. Sparky Electric. And through his franchise operations experience and learning development background, Joel stands by the critical need for innovative learning, measuring training, and inspiring personal development. And in my personal opinion, is the perfect person to speak on scalability due to all of that. So we are really excited to have him with us. Thank you for being here and dropping the knowledge, Joel.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here as well. I can't wait.
We appreciate it. One more piece here before you guys get to hear from Joel. So in today's discussion, we are going to touch on the importance of scalability, how we can build those repeatable processes, across multiple locations. What can we do to process improve, get people interested and attracted to coming to our company? But not only that, like how do we retain them through scalable training, and how do we make training fun? So we'll start by saying a little bit about who Joel is. So Joel, if you could give us a little bit more background on who you are and kind of what you bring to the scalability process.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I work for Success Academy, which is a training entity for 1 Hour HVAC, Mr. Sparky Electric, and Benjamin Franklin Plumbing. And we create, implement, measure, and administer the training. And I specialize on the online side of things, making sure that the training is scalable, interactive, engaging, modern, and working the way it's supposed to. And when we talk about scaling in the franchise world, it's so important, especially when you have over 350 locations across the US working together. And when we talk about scaling in the trade industry business, the easiest analogy, in my opinion, is franchising, which we'll get to later. But back to me, my role with the online training is really important in ensuring that consistency across all the brands for scaling. In addition, before joining Success Academy, I worked with Louisiana State Civil Service, which is basically the HR for all of the state agencies. And what we did there was scaling was important in this role because not everyone could travel to the state capital to learn those best practices of their job and communication skills. So I worked with them to scale their training via online courses and creating these training assets that could be leveraged at each state agency location.
Awesome. I appreciate that little bit of extra background. I
Mhm.
know, like we said, scalability, kind of that buzzword in there. And a big piece of being in the franchise world is scalability. But, what does really scalability mean? Because I think it is one of those buzzwords that everyone hears, but no one understands how to do or see the path forward in it in any capacity. So given that background, could you please share like kind of where you view scalability as a piece of a term, and also kind of how you see its importance when it comes to businesses, knowing that it's a huge part of franchise world.
Yeah. So first part of your question is, what is scalability? Scalability is the ability to grow without being hampered by its structure or available resources when faced with an increase in production. A great example of this would be getting twice the amount of normal calls in a day than you normally would get. And if you're running HVAC business, plumbing, electrical, there's a few things you would need to do. There may be some booking changes, but most importantly, you would need to scale. Add on more people to your team, train those people. You need to change the way you answer calls, maybe, as well as how you dispatch calls. And even you have to be able to answer these questions. Is the back of house able to handle this influx? Can your software handle it? And what about your inventory? Do you have that inventory? So that's the first part of your question. Second part is, were these kind of being a necessity, and how was it really important? And there's three big things, and you had them on the PowerPoint here. The first is the repeatable processes. When there's repeating processes, consistency is created, which will put everyone on your team in the same boat and rowing in the same direction, which is so, so, so important. You don't want a boat where it's going to be going down with the Titanic, right? Or someone's not watching out and doing the right thing. Yep. And then your call takers will know their job. The dispatchers will know their jobs. Your install crews will know what to do, and your techs will know what to do. And they're all working as this efficient business. Second part is that business confidence. And this is where franchising really comes into play in my perspective. And the best example is just our reputation for our brands. What one location does in South Florida is the same as a location in New York. It's the same as Santa Rosa, California, the same in Chicago, all over the US, right? We all work together to build a reputation and uphold these high level of service and customer service. And we actually teach proper ways of answering the phones, and even like approaching a client's house, ways to park, etc. I could go on, but all these things add up to build a reputation, and that reputation builds not only your company's confidence, but also your employees' confidence, because they know they have a system to follow that works, and that has this proven efficiency. The third part we have on the PowerPoint is the skills gap. And when you scaled with training at the forefront of your mind, you're able to teach fundamentals much more efficiently. This helps you be able to hire for attitude and then teach the tech stuff through training structures like Interplay, or even like laid out career pathing.
Totally. And I think that something that you mentioned there is not necessarily just, how much goes into scalability, but just kind of the actual importance of it. Because if you don't have it from the ground floor, how are you going to get from one location to two and still create that business confidence? Really in being someone using a service, saying I used XYZ company in Dallas. Now, if I go to Nashville and there is a location, what does that look like for me? Am I going to get the same level of customer service and get the same out of it that I was expecting? Because now it's an expectation.
Yep. It all starts with that beginning intentional kind of moving that needle forward, saying I'm going to scale and this is how I'm going to do it, and starting with that mind frame. It's very, very important.
Exactly. And it can be super overwhelming. Probably someone on this call is sitting there like, all that sounds great, but where do I even start? Yep. And so I think maybe a starting point for us is kind of how knowing that scalability is the backbone of franchise business growth and business growth in general, but specifically franchise business growth. How have you personally seen some of those scalable processes push movement forward?
Yeah, so there's a few things here. Definitely, when it comes to our brands, we have franchise business consultants where they're partnering with these different location owners and managers and making sure they're staying on track with these processes and procedures, and making sure that their P&L statements are as they should be. But also, I think, when we talk about that question a little bit bigger, the biggest thing that comes to my mind is being this one centralized system and network. And the best example is a location that does an awesome job at, replacement sales. That location also conducts quarterly meetings about educating their team on replacement sales. And we've taken their presentation and shared that training with others across our network to help improve those replacement sales that they have, because they're probably facing the same problem and they can leverage this information. Another great example would be, one location recording a series of little small videos with their phone, but these videos revolved around just these common things that Mr. Sparky faces, like common just requests. So it was a way of like onboarding their new employees. We're able to take those videos, put it on our system, and then spread it to our other locations. So, it just takes effort of collecting, training, and then scaling. Another experience that I want to mention is, and I kind of mentioned this before in the previous question, but the call takers and the customer service, no matter what city you call from, you'll always hear or branded hello of answering the phone lines and the call scripts. And this may not sound like much, but it created that structured experience along with our scheduling windows that makes us great and be able to scale at the same time.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to note on that piece too, is like maybe for going back to kind of what I just said, going back to what I said, where you might be the smaller business on this that's trying to figure out how I can get from, one shop to two shops or two shops to 10 shops, whatever that may look like, as opposed to, 250 shops to 450 shops. How can I scale this on a lower capacity, but still build those from the ground in? And I think that that's a really great starting point from my perspective, is creating consistency as you move forward and making sure you're documenting things so that you do have that process to build off of.
Yeah. And as a small mom and pop shop, I'd also would want to mention, for us with these bigger brands and these bigger businesses, we do have these FBCs that help. But if you're a small mom and pop shop, you still probably have this management team, or you have your known leaders. That's where you get them involved. And you say, hey, like, let's think this through. What do we look like in 1 to 2 to 3 to even 5 years? And, how are we expecting to get there? And do we have those means of getting there? And do we have those processes to get there? And it's just, you have to start with that intention and follow through with it. It's nice to also say, hey, like, this is what I want in 5 years, but you have to take action. You have to follow up with it.
Yeah. I mean, I know personal preference. It's not always my number one go-to when I want to write everything down and make it for the next person to be able to do it exactly. But I think that is, scalability in any industry, not just the trades industry. You have to have a process that someone else can easily follow. And at least from my perspective, might be the number one place to start is what has been working, what hasn't been working, and how can I write that down in either capacity for the next person that comes in.
Yeah.
Cool. I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but scalable processes can help you decrease the pain of the skills gap that everyone on this call is very aware is going on, specifically in attraction and retention. And I know that you've seen that, and I would love for you to maybe speak on how you personally have seen that as someone, actually in the business themselves.
Yeah, so I've definitely seen that pain of the skill gap lesson, mainly because that's my job. If something's if it's not going right, if that's not being filled, then that's a red flag for me and my performance evaluation. But me and my team, we make sure that we're solving that gap. And we do that by two main things when it comes to training offerings. We have the soft skills training and technical training. Talk about soft skills. When a location gets new employees, they have to know about our brands, our processes, and they also have to know about how to communicate with the customer. And we build this type of training ourselves in-house, but you can also outsource it or even create the training yourself, even your mom and pop shops. That just goes back to that documentation, understanding what those processes are and just creating that structure for it. The other part is that technical skills. And for technical training, we have a couple of solutions, but the main one being Interplay. And there's a huge difference between someone reading how to do something and then actually practicing doing it, especially before they go into a home. And this is really important when it comes to troubleshooting and diagnosing. And not to make this a plug, but honestly, in my personal opinion, using Interplay has really proven to work for us. We even did a case study where we compared our callbacks for when techs used the training versus not used it. And there was this huge statistical difference. And I think Lori, she may be on the call, she kind of helped us out with it as well.
She probably is.
But here's the thing. Interplay works well with companies that scale because it's so online based and at your own pace. And there's two more things I want to mention here while we're on this subject. Interplay, it really does the heavy lifting for you. They have diagrams and PowerPoints within their program. Use that to your advantage. Put it on the screen while you're doing your weekly training. Talk about the problems and how to get to that solution. The other part that I want to talk about when it comes to Interplay is the gamification piece. And we talk about bringing modern training. This is it. As humans, we learn that we learn from our mistakes. You do something wrong, that's a red flag. You don't do it again. We've all experienced that. But and also, everyone's played a video game before, even like Tetris on your phone. At some point, you get to a hard level, you fail. And then you try again, you eventually pass it. For me, like, for example, there's a Mario game when I was younger. I had to do like this double jump and then this like word punch move and then jump again after to get to the next level. Sounds confusing. Took me like 20 tries to do, but I finally get it. But here's the thing. 10 years later, 15 years later, however long ago it was, I remember that. I remember like how many times I failed and what I had to do to get it right. And the same thing goes for our technicians, plumbers, and electricians in these Interplay courses. They're going through, they may make mistakes, and if they make mistakes, they fail. And it's sad to say, but we almost sometimes want them to fail because that's the best way for them to learn. And here's the other thing. Eventually they'll pass it, they'll learn what they're doing wrong, and then they'll go run service calls and they'll get it right. And here's like the other like huge thing. I'd much rather them fail in that class, in that Interplay training versus in someone's house. Because if they fail in someone's house, that's probably going to result in a callback. Then I take money out my pocket or the business's pocket to send them back to that house for that service call. So it's just really, really important. I think I'm talking up and talking well about Interplay, but there's a reason for that. They're really effective in the sense of bringing that valuable training to our teams. And when we talk about GAP, no one likes to read a textbook for 2 hours. And we all I feel like the younger generation, even most generations would prefer it that way as well, where you're actually going and applying it and not just sitting down and reading it.
Yeah, and I think that actually kind of brings me back to our very first webinar of this series, where Krista Washburn, our multifamily expert, was actually speaking to using this as an attraction and retention skill from, having a clear career onboarding and a clear career path once you are brought on, because the dream is always the self-motivated learner. And how do you create the self-motivated learner? Well, you give them something that they actually want to do to get them to the point where they want to. Because I think from my own perspective, whenever I've, started a career, started a new job, I'm always that person who has 1,000 questions, but because I want to know, I want to learn, and I want to make sure there's a path where I can grow and continue to move into that and know that I'm, learning something new every day. But when you start, you don't want to be the person that's annoying. So what is the process and what's that balance of finding, the clarity between, I have a lot of questions that I need answers to, but not be the person that asks questions that, maybe they could find the answer to if they had the right piece in front of them to find that, whether that be a soft skills training, whether that be a technical training, like being able to take that initiative to find it is almost sometimes more gratifying.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's also another piece in there that I keep bringing up leadership in these add-on pieces, but I think when you have your leaders that are true leaders, not just managers, but are going in there, they're actually going in there with the intention to understand those employees, and they're having empathy. And when you're able to do both of those things combined with what you just said, there's this great kind of motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic, that really kind of, it puts those employees on a great career path. So.
Totally. And I know from, our discussions on Monday and just knowing you in general that that is definitely something you do. And I think would be a great top takeaway for anyone who's on this call, kind of being like, what do I start with? How do I know you said write everything down, but then how do I actually get people to adopt this? And how do I adopt this? Like, how do I even bring technology into my training and onboarding program? How do I start with soft skills? How do I create a call center? Um, but all that being said, you have technology in your toolkit. How can we start using it? How can we maybe add that to our trades business to move more towards scalability? Could you speak a little bit on maybe how you guys started using more scalable processes and more technology when you were, creating this program for onboarding?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say, like, for us, the very first thing is to understand the problem or the gap that you're having. Maybe that is technical skills, and or maybe it's soft skills. Like, you have to ask yourself, where's the problem really happening, and is it really a problem? And if it's technical skills, then great. Then I definitely recommend looking at Interplay. But also make sure that it fits that knowledge gap. Like, for us, we use Interplay specifically for troubleshooting diagnosing problems, and we specifically give this to our mid to senior level technicians, plumbers, and electricians. In addition, in contrast, we have this other potential opportunity where we leverage another technical program, but this other program is more so textbook and video training, and we use that for entry level technicians. So we're solving different problems here. You see mid to senior, and then your entry level. They're two different concepts. And so, going back to what I was saying, understand your employees and what they need. And once you have that figured out, saying, hey, this is definitely the solution, then really be sure to visualize what this looks like. Are they going to doing this? Are they going to be doing this training once a week, once every 2 weeks, or actually before they came into work every day? How vigorous is this training schedule? And for all brands, for example, it all depends on, once again, that problem. Is it a big problem, and are they not really being very successful on these calls? And perhaps they're coming in 30 minutes before their day gets started every day, and doing these interplay trainings, or doing these kinds of customized trainings, things that we put together for them. But if it's just kind of like, hey, it's definitely a problem, but it's not really a high worry for us, it's not really a red flag, it's like cautionary, then maybe it's a once a week or once every 2 weeks, right? And here's the most important thing that I think a lot of us kind of fell at when it comes to training and just being training entities. There's an accountability factor. So they do the training, and a lot of times it's like, okay, you did this training, now go over on your call and don't make that mistake again. But that's not how it should necessarily be done. It's more important for you to have a conversation after training. So the training takes place, and then ask them, what did you learn? Well, what did you not know? Because maybe they actually already knew it. So maybe the problem's not what you think it is. And so then you can get to a better solution, or keep troubleshooting the problem. But here's the thing, you have to be having these conversations. Here's another pitfall. Maybe he's just burnt out. Maybe he's just maybe he's got so much going on with so many service calls. And by the end of the day, his mind's just empty, right? But you won't know that unless you're actually holding them accountable and having these very genuine and personalized conversations. And as the owner, maybe it's not you, maybe it's your management team or your service leader, but they should be having these conversations then. It just really takes getting to know this situation. And I know that sounds time consuming, but I think especially in today's age and just general world, we need to really hone in on those connections with people. And in return, get your people that will get your people to stay at your location, right? Because we're all having recruiting problems right now, no matter what business sector or trade you're in. There's no beating around that bush. So when we're able to really form these genuine connections, develop them, then they're going to feel more committed with you as a business owner, because you've got them to where they are. You helped them, right? So I know that was a lot for your question, but there's a lot that goes into it. And it's not just like one solution fits all. It really depends on that problem and going about solving it. And
Yeah.
it's very different based on your team as well. But you have to get to know your team. You have to know your problem, and you have to keep that pulse.
No, I totally agree. And I think this kind of talks back to what we were talking about together on Monday. And, you know, Frank Garo, for anyone who was on November's webinar, our plumbing and HVAC expert, he was speaking a little bit to, you know, the concern of maybe training your competition versus the concern of falling behind in not training, because, you know, there is that level of, I have to be in the game to have the employee want to stay anyways, because if you're not providing that, someone else will provide that to them. So it can't be a concern of, I'm going to train my competition and allow them to leave. It needs to be a concern of, I want to create the best employee out there, because if I don't, someone else will.
That concern should then become a standard, right? For numerous reasons. One, if I know that I created this great technician, he's going off to somewhere else, that's your reputation. Everyone's getting those great technicians from you. So eventually, you know, even your entry level people, perhaps who haven't been employed yet, they're going to go to you because they know you're the best out there or in that area. You know,
that's a really great point.
Yeah, a great thing that I really want to mention here is there's these two big things that motivate people to stay in companies, right? Intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic is how they feel, kind of what I mentioned earlier, you know, they're feeling that dedication, that commitment. And then that extrinsic's more money. But it's not one or the other. It's a combo. And like I mentioned earlier, you have to get to know each employee and what motivates them, because that one solution is not going to fit everyone. And sometimes it's just having these genuine connections and these genuine conversations that can really lead to this fostered relationship where they're happy. Because eventually, I mean, money is great and money talks, but there's other things that talk as well. There's other things that will motivate someone to stay. So, but you don't know what motivates them until you have these conversations. Exactly.
Yeah. And I actually think that's a great transition into both a little bit of a combo of our poll and a question that came through. So I keyed up a poll at the beginning of this where I said, do you highlight training as a benefit during your hiring process? And 84% of people said yes. You know, a couple people said no, and 13% of people said depends on the individual. And I think that keys up in tandem with a question that came through that really makes sense. It says, how can I position my training and processes as an asset during the hiring process? Like scalable processes as an asset during the hiring process. And I think that a lot of what you said kind of aligns with that, but also knowing which individual to maybe tell that to, or do we tell that to everyone?
Yeah, so when it comes to the hiring process and like having those training assets, you know, I would leverage it, but I leverage it, but you know, I also really want to I call it like this big, tangible, shiny object. And I call it that because, you know, when we talk about interplay training, interplay is really cool, right? And if I'm going through and I'm hiring someone on, I'm interviewing them and I'm showing them, you know, what it's like to be at my company, because I'm not just saying, hey, I'm your only choice. I know there's 4 or 5 other companies who have the same position, who are fighting, you know, blood for blood to get technicians in there, right? But if I can say, hey, let's just say Billy Bob, you know, I want you to join our company, and Billy Bob, we have these really great opportunities. You won't get this at these other locations around this area. For example, we have VR training. Look at Sammy Joe in the back of house right now doing this VR training with a headset. And me as like this young blood wanting to further my career, and I see you're giving this great opportunity and I'm doing this really fun training. I'm like, oh wow, like maybe this work isn't all just, you know, day after day running service calls. Maybe I can really develop myself and have fun as well. And so in this sense, you can really leverage it in that way. Another way, this is kind of a separate note, but another way that we leverage our training assets is we actually have these, we call them pre-hire tests, but it's all based on the training that we have. And our positions, we have level 1, level 2, and level 3 technicians, plumbers, and electricians. And so whenever we're interviewing them, we're giving these pre-hire tests that we've leveraged from our training information. And we're saying, hey, take this training test, and we're going to see where you fall, whether it's level 1, 2, or 3. And hopefully this is going to match up from what they've been telling you based on, your interview process. So let's say he's interviewing for a level 2, but he's testing at a level 1. Then it becomes a conversation of, hey, look, you actually tested at a level 1. We still really want you. You'll be hired as a level 1. But listen, I think if you go to another company, they won't tell you how they're going to get you level 2. I actually have a career pathway that I can show you right now on what that level 2 looks like for us and how we're going to get you there, right? It's just that it's a big different ballgame at that point because there's this transparency about it. But that brings me to my next point. You have to follow up, right?
Mhm.
Don't just be having Sammy Joe do the VR training because someone's coming for an interview. Like there needs to be a schedule with it, and you need to be following through with that training because it's going to be a huge red flag for that new employee if you're not following up with those promises that you make, and then you will have a retention problem at that point. I would have to assume.
Totally. And I think that I was actually about to ask you Tunde's question from the chat, but I think you kind of just answered it. It was asked, how do you balance always training your technicians, which is good, and the poaching from competitors because they know you have great and well-trained employees? And I think it comes down to building loyalty and building career paths, because I know
Yep.
as an employee myself, when I, start somewhere, I'm looking to where can I learn, grow, and go next.
Yep.
No one that I have run into yet, there might be someone out there, but no
Mhm.
one that I have run into yet wants to stay in the same place forever.
Yep. I would
I think
follow that up with, I think, when we talk about recruiting, we think of it as a one stage thing. We just should always be recruiting. It's not like that. Think of it as a circle, right? You start with recruiting and attracting those people into your business. And then you have that interviewing or that hiring process. Then you have onboarding where you're getting them up to speed. And then that last kind of quarter is retaining. You have to retain those people. And that has those intrinsic, extrinsic things that I mentioned earlier. But and I mentioned this earlier as well, you have to get to know your people. And the question is, why are they leaving? Not just saying, this goes back to that problem, right? This is a problem. People are leaving your company, but you have to ask, why are they leaving? And then solve that problem. Maybe it's training, maybe it's not training. The solution won't always be training. I mean, it would be nice if it was, because that'd be really good for me working for a training entity. But the truth is that it's not always that. Maybe the problem is your management. Maybe it's your leadership. But you have to understand why they're leaving and digging deeper into it.
totally. And I think that kind of comes full circle in understanding that once we understand why they're leaving, we need to find a way to fix it and then be able to scale that across multiple locations, because your brand really is everything, especially in today's day and age when, there are 1,000 different options. If I was looking to, get something fixed on my HVAC system, I have so many options if I needed to. So
Yeah.
how do you become the option that everyone goes to because you're the brand best, or the one that has the same customer service level across every location, no matter where you go?
Yeah, I also want to mention real quick, because this is kind of also in my mind at this point. We talk about in the HVAC world, plumbing, electricians, when we talk about replacement sales, sometimes we'll get smoke screens. So the customer will say something like, oh, I don't want to do it because I want to talk to my wife first. Is the real reason getting it okay from his wife? Or is it actually because of, the system costs too much, he doesn't want to do it, or X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, right? There's could be numerous other problems there. You have to have that same kind of mind space when it comes to having these conversations with employees. They say, you don't pay me enough, this other company is going to pay me more. I can almost guarantee you that's probably not the only problem. Someone doesn't just leave a company because they can make more money somewhere else. There's typically other things behind it. So much like we teach our kind of technicians to have these leading questions, not just yes, no questions, we should be doing the same thing for our employees. We shouldn't just be saying, okay, like I understand they pay you more. Like you should, and I'm not saying being aggressive with it, but have a genuine conversation and try to really understand those perhaps real reasons besides money and pay.
Totally. I completely
Yeah.
agree. And I think that is a good wrap up to jump into Q&A, because we do have a few questions that came through in the chat. And so I want to make sure we have a little bit of time to get through to them.
Mhm.
Specifically, one that I thought was interesting is, how do I incentivize learning? Sandra brought us this one.
Yeah. So I sometimes feel like this question can almost be a trap, because the obvious and easy answer is to connect it back to awards, right? If you do X hours of training, then you get Y. And Y can be anything from a day off to monetary value to coming in like, 2 hours later, Monday morning. Or you can even just do a leaderboard as well, and posting that, at your training location where everyone can see. However, this is going back to what I keep saying before. I think if you're having a genuine connection and your leaders who are promoting growth in the business, incentive may not be needed. For example, I have a vision of my career, and you kind of mentioned this earlier as well.
Mhm.
And we all have a vision for a career. It's your leader's job to help pave that path through training and letting those direct reports know how to get there. Because we all want to be successful, especially in our careers. So I think if you have leadership who's really laying out those career paths, it's a lot easier than just always having to give that monetary and kind of extrinsic value for promotion in a way. And I want to say, another, this can be seen as a plug as well, but it's truly not. I know Interplay also has career pathways as well coming out. Or they kind of have this like mid and senior level kind of pathways for learners. And I definitely would say, that's another piece to leverage in those conversations.
Totally, kind of gives you a way,
Yeah.
whether you do that through us or you do that through another
Mhm.
path, a
I
way
also,
to say we're
yeah,
going the next place.
I feel like I'm talking a lot about recruiting, retention, the topic scaling. But here's the thing: if you're able to recruit and retain your employees, the scaling will become a lot easier, right? Because you have those vital people in your business that at that point you can trust. And eventually they're going to be out this top level in their career pathway. It's like, okay, what's my next move? And perhaps, you want to open a new location,
Mhm.
not so much in that small territory that you're in right now. Perhaps it's, 50, 100 miles in a different direction. Well, then you can take those leaders and have your trusted people and have them run that new shop. And here's the thing: those new leaders that are running that new shop are going to be even more invested in you, because you're showing them that you're invested in them, and giving them those opportunities. Yeah, I feel like I went a lot into recruiting and retention and didn't nail the head on that scaling piece. But yeah, there's a connection there. It all works
Totally.
together.
And I think that's kind of why this is the bow tie of this series, if you will, because I think everything that we've talked about, for those of you who have been around prior, are all of those attraction, retention, brand building topics all fall into, ultimately, how do I grow my business? And that's scaling. And so it's talking to how I can interweave all of those different business processes into something that's repeatable. And I think that kind of leads us to a good question that came through from Tim here. He wants to know what the very first step to scaling is.
Yeah, and I know I mentioned this before as well, but be intentional in your business and training. So if you're wanting to build your business, make more money and be efficient, then it starts with being intentional. It will not happen by accident. Document your training and document your processes. Don't just carry out training on replacement sales because you heard that worked. Do it because you actually need it. And then if you have team members lacking in technical training and knowledge, then find a solution to it, right? But be intentional, because it will not happen by accident. You can't document accident, and you can document like the outcome of it, but you won't know how you got there, when it happened, and the details that can help you learn in the future.
Totally. I think that it's super important to have that documentation. And I know that I honed in on it a lot because it's something that, as kind of in that project management mindset in my brain, that I'm
Yeah.
always focused on too, is how could I create something that if I was, going to take a step forward, someone else would be able to come in and help me and take over this part of this.
Yeah.
So with that being said, we have one last question I think we can get to before, wrapping up. And I appreciate you guys all being here, but I will give one more out. What are some problems you have faced with scaling?
Yeah, I would definitely say the biggest, I wouldn't say problem, I would say barrier you'll face is everyone may not necessarily be on the same page. But this is where your management team comes into play, right? They need to make sure that they're all playing the same game and winning. This again takes knowing your team members and keeping a pulse on that business that I mentioned earlier. Same analogy as the boat, right? If you're all rowing in different directions, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to become the Titanic. There's going to be arguments and hectic, and you just don't want that, right? So I think, to me, everyone has to be aware of the vision, the mission, and how those processes all work together. Sometimes that means having an all hands on board meeting. I know I'm using a lot of boat analogies here. That's not my intention, but it takes, everyone coming together and understanding it together and really seeing how it all works. Sometimes when it comes to training, that means having the technicians sit with the call takers and watching them do their processes, how they take calls and how they schedule them, right? Same thing with having a call taker sit back in like the accounting section. Maybe that'll help her or him understand the way those systems work. They're all related to each other. Even technicians partnering with installers or inventory, having this bigger picture come together, it'll make it more efficiency. And I know, once again, this takes time, right? We all want just our technicians to be running service calls 24/7. And we all know that what's going to cause burnout. But, there has to be this line that we draw where it's say, hey, no, like, you can't just be running calls all the time. There's this understanding fundamental and this training fundamental that will lead to success in your job if you do these things, if you understand these things. And it's just really important. I can't say that enough.
Totally. I 100% agree. And I think that it is just the barrier to entry essentially is that you have to be transparent, open, create those processes, and then the people will come. I look at everything that I've done in my career and all the roles that I've been in is that it's the people come when they are surrounded by things that they see growth in and growth mindset in. And I think being able to project and position yourself as a growth mindset business is how you get people to your company to actually grow, because until you have that growth mindset, people don't see growth there. So with that being said, I want to say thank you, Joel, for being here, and thank you everyone else for also being here. We really appreciate it. I know I have loved having you guys with me for the last 5 months. And as a reminder, you guys are going to get a webinar replay link tomorrow. And also be on the lookout for more awesome webinar learning opportunities in the future. We've got some more coming down the pipeline, and I'll make sure that you guys get to see those moving forward. If you're interested in getting in touch with Interplay, please reach out to marketing@interplaylearning.com. And if you're interested in learning more about scalability and kind of some of the things that Joel's brought to the table, feel free to reach out to Joel directly at joel.berken@authoritybrands.co. Specifically, we look forward to, hearing more from you guys. So don't be strangers. Thanks, guys.
See ya. Thank y'all.
Bye.